Well, what an honor it is to be with you all this evening. I was in Florida here speaking on Friday, Saturday, and I had the opportunity to be on a sailboat for a cruise, just seeing St. Augustine. And as it so happens, I have interesting conversations with people everywhere I go. And the gal working the sailboat was telling us, we asked her, is there a great place to go get seafood while we're in town? I mean, I can only last like a day or two without beef, but I wanted to try some seafood while I was in Florida. And she says, well, I don't eat much seafood. I'm like, here in Florida? Well, yeah, I feel so bad for the fish. And my sister said, well, there's a ton of fish out there. It's okay. And then she says, well, I do like beef. And I perk up. I get really excited. I'm like, a beef gal? She's like, yeah, I was grilling burgers tonight, or just tonight before I came to work. And I'm like, well, that's great. We're cattle ranchers from South Dakota. Had my three sisters there. And my other sister pipes up because she goes, well, I like beef, but I feel like I shouldn't eat too much of it because, climate change, of course. And before I could say anything, give her my spiel on climate change being an absolute lie that we don't buy into here in South Dakota, my sister says out loud, well, if you feel bad for the fish, do you know what we do to the cows? So I don't know if she's going to eat more beef after that. But I've spent my life trying to share the story of America's farmers and ranchers. I got started kind of by accident. You see, growing up on the ranch in Mitchell, raising cattle as the oldest of three daughters alongside mom and dad, they had kind of wanted a better life for us girls. And my parents, I remember when I got to be about 17, 18 years old, thinking about what I'm going to do with the rest of my life, they said, Amanda, do anything but be involved in the cattle business. It's capital intensive, it's risky, you've got the markets, you've got the weather, you're gonna work like a dog, and it's a hard life. Go see the world, go do anything else. And so as an 18-year-old farm kid who had never been on an airplane before, I get an internship at the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C. I traveled to D.C., and I've never been in a big city before. I'm a fish out of water, quite literally. I mean, I'm quite overwhelmed. I get to George Washington University, where I'm assigned to live with a randomly selected roommate for the summer. I get to my dorm room with my luggage to check in, and I meet my roommate, and her name is Meredith, and she's a vegan animal rights activist from New Jersey. Your imagination serves you well. I learned that within the first 30 seconds of meeting her, and I'm looking at her bug-eyed because I'm terrified. I'm like, well, that's cool, but I'm kind of scared to tell you I'm a cattle rancher from South Dakota, and I really like beef, and is this going to be a problem this summer? And it kind of was. I mean, we might as well have lived on different planets. Our lives were so fundamentally different that I didn't know how we would find common ground. And you see, she had seen a video of animal abuse in California dairy, which if you and I saw it, we would have had the exact same reaction as Meredith, that it was unacceptable, they're bad apples, they're an exception to the rule, that's not who we are in rural America in production agriculture. And yet she was convinced that is who we are, and that so much so that not only was she going to skip the cheeseburger for the rest of her life, but she was going to join an animal rights activist group, the Humane Society of the United States, and this is where I got my start, is fighting that lobbyist group, who doesn't save the dogs and cats like their commercials promise, but instead they lobby, litigate, and legislate to take you and I off the land and to take beef off the dinner plate. And so it was a long summer. It was a frustrating summer. And for the first time in my life, I had to my values of how I was raised, how I grew up, what my parents had instilled in me, hard work and faith and grit and not giving up and putting others' needs before your own and taking care of the cattle before you take care of yourself. All of those things were challenged for the first time. And I thought, man, I don't know if I can get through this summer. But I'm persistent, and we would go on our grocery store walks to go get our food so we could pack our lunches for our internships, throughout the week. And on those walks, we would talk about food. And Meredith and I, even though we would put way different foods in our cart, I realized we cared about the exact same things. We cared about food safety and nutrition. We cared about the environment. We cared about animal welfare. We cared if it tastes good. And let's be honest, we were broke college kids, so we cared if it fit in our budget, we could pay for it too. And so once we could connect on those shared values, we could start having real conversations. We could start building that relationship and trust. And although this never happens, and usually it's death threats and crazy things from animal rights activists, but I am proud to say, as an 18-year-old kid living with a vegan animal rights activist from New Jersey, Meredith was eating beef again by the end of the summer. So that was like my gold star win. You can clap for that. I earned it, man. You know, ever since then, I realized I didn't belong in a concrete jungle. I did want to see cattle grazing on the land. I did want to see the stars in the sky. And I did want to get back home to production agriculture of what you and I love and treasure and hold dear. But I had to experience a little bit more of the world. And I knew if I was going to come back home to the ranch, I was going to have to figure out a few things. I was going to have to figure out how to tell the story correctly, because there's less than 2% of us involved in production agriculture today, and the story that's being told about us is dictating policy, is dictating our political moves in this country, is dictating how we get to own and manage our land as we see fit. But I knew I'd have to learn how to tell the story of agriculture, and I knew I'd have to find pathways to profitability to bring myself back home to the ranch. And that's been the focus in my work of not only learning it along the way, but helping others as I do it. But one other story happened to me when I was in college that I truly think the good Lord was planting a seed for the battles that the American cattle rancher would face in the years to come. The good Lord was preparing me for what was ahead. I studied abroad in Argentina for a summer. And while I lived there, had the great opportunity to tour the whole country. This was 2008. And we were headed to Iguazu Falls, one of the biggest, largest waterfalls in the world. I've never really told this story in a speech before, but I was thinking about it on the way out here, and I think it ties into exactly what's happening in South Dakota and across the nation. You see, we were on this bus tour. We were driving through the night. We were going to go see this waterfall. And it was an excited tour bus of American college kids, just jacked to have a wonderful experience. And as we're driving through the night in the dark, a group of men with guns ran a rope across the road. They stopped our bus. And pretty soon, in fast-talking Spanish, these men came onto the bus and were talking to the bus driver. They told the bus driver, you need to pull over this bus on the side of the road and sit there. And the bus driver informed him, these are American students. You know, we're not here to cause problems. And, you know, I'm scared to death. Half the bus is sleeping. There's just a few of us seeing what's going on. And I'm thinking, I'm going to die here in Argentina. But we pulled over the side of the bus, and my face is plastered to the window. And do you know what I saw that day? I saw a pile of dead cows standing on the side of the road. And I didn't see bad guys with guns. I saw ranchers. Those ranchers had started those cows on fire in protest, because what the government in Argentina was doing there was they were taxing the farmers out of business. They were putting a ban on exporting the beef to price fix it to make sure that the Argentinian consumer could have access to that beef, and they were going out of business. And as I looked out that window, I didn't see strangers. I saw my dad. I saw my grandpa. I saw my neighbors back home. And I remember at 19 years old, I thought that day, if anything like this ever happens in the United States of America, I'm going to fight it. I'm going to fight it. I never thought it would come here. And yet here we are. I've spent 20 years fighting these animal rights activists and these climate change extremists. These folks that no matter how well you take care of your animals, you will never take care of them well enough because they don't want you to have the cattle in the first place. These climate change extremists, no matter how green you are, you will never be green enough for people who don't want you to be on the land in the first place. And slowly but surely, over the last 15 years, American agriculture has bought into the lie. Why? Not because it makes sense, not because we think we're going to move the needle on the temperature of the planet, but because of money. Because the taxpayers are funding a fundamental lie that is anti-life, anti-humanity, anti-food security, and anti-American, period. In South Dakota, this story came knocking on my door. And it has been an experience that will change my life for the rest of my life. Tonight I want to tell that story
of the South Dakota landowners who have fought the good fight, who have faced the bad guys in their backyards trying to take what's not theirs, and they have won. That story started when a carbon sequestration pipeline, not one but two, came to eastern South Dakota. They came and knocked on some doors, and over 160 condemnation papers were given to unsuspecting landowners, not for something fundamentally useful, not for a public use project like water or electricity, but to bury plant food, the building block of life, and permanently sequester it to produce nothing, to do nothing, but to virtue signal using you and I's taxpayer dollars. I didn't know much about it. I was starting to hear a trickle of what was going on, and then I got a phone call. I got a phone call from an elderly widow named Rita Brown. Rita Brown said that this company had come to her house and said, "You sign this easement no matter, or else we will put this pipeline wherever we want." Rita had called me crying. I spent 2 hours on the phone with her, hearing her story. Remember, I was devastated by it, because if you own land, if you have put blood, sweat, and tears for generations into a piece of America, that is a dream worth fighting for. That is a dream worth protecting. That is something you have bought and earned, and it has every right for you to do what you want on it, to pass it on to your kids, and to create a legacy that will outlast you and live for generations to come. And here Rita was being told, your dream isn't so important. Our dream is more important. Why? Because there's millions and millions of dollars at stake, so you don't matter. Well, I thought Rita's story might have been a one-off until I started getting an avalanche of phone calls. And I couldn't deny that the right side of history was to stand against a Green New Deal carbon boondoggle scam with foreign backers, out-of-state investors, and something we didn't want in the state of South Dakota. Tonight, I want to share the victories of what happened next. Because when our back was against the wall, when the bully was in the backyard, when families were facing the unfathomable thought of a private company coming to seize what was not theirs, we got to work. And there's a lesson in that. There's a lesson in standing up for what is right, for fighting for your legacy, and for doing the work when it counts. So what happened next? Landowners got to work. We went to Pierre year after year with bills, and those bills got shot down. The landowners, the farmers and ranchers from east to west would show up to tell their story, and not only would they get shut down, but we got treated like garbage. We got treated like we didn't matter. The lobbyists got the red carpet rolled out, but the farmers and the ranchers in the plaid shirts were told, your story doesn't count. In fact, I'm pretty sure there was some farmers from Leola, South Dakota, who were looked down upon because they dared to wear plaid shirts to the Capitol. And that's when activation happened. You see, there was a bill. And I would say it might have been the most important bill that ever happened in the state of South Dakota, because it changed the political landscape forever. SB 201 was introduced in the state of South Dakota. That bill was sold to us as a landowner bill of rights, and yet it was anything but. That bill would have seized local control from counties and consolidated it to 3 members of the PUC. And we watched systematically as that bill was pushed through and perpetuated and pushed on to the South Dakota citizens, despite our pleas and our activations and our urgent calls to say this isn't the right thing to do. But I have to thank those legislators for pushing 201, because what happened next has the entire nation watching of what can happen when good people get off the bench and get to work and fight to do the right thing. What happened next was we have a referral system in South Dakota, and the citizens of South Dakota were not very happy with the fake landowner Bill of Rights. So they got to work. We were required to get 17,500 signatures to refer that law and put it onto the ballot in the November election. In 90 short days, 500 unpaid volunteers on their own time and their own dime got to work and got 38,000 signatures to put that bill onto the ballot. And you know what happened next? We defeated that law called RL 21 in 65 of 66 counties with 59% of the vote. And more than that, we fired and sent home 12 legislators who pushed that piece of legislation forward. And when it came time to the election, once the legislators got back to Pierre, true conservatives like Carla and John and Marty and all of these great folks that were on the panel earlier today, we seized leadership control. These were people that had had boots on the ground. Carla and John were the first people to show up in Leola, South Dakota, when the landowners were saying, there's a bad guy here. We need help. So now we have the Speaker of the House, John Hanson. We have Speaker Pro Tem Carla Lems. We've got the Senate side with true leadership as well, saying we're going to stand up for landowners. We're going to stand up for property rights. And then the 2025 legislative session happened. And there was a lot of activity going on. There was some hostile bills that, again, would have crippled and slowly, like the frogs in the boiling pot of water, taken more and more of our private property rights and local control away. But there was one bill, HB 1052, that was introduced by Carla Lems and Mark Radke. That bill was finally going to give an opportunity for South Dakotans to truly have their voices be heard. And all they were saying is, if you want to invest in and sign on for a Green New Deal carbon sequestration pipeline that's backed by Saudi Arabia, you go right ahead. As for some of us ranchers who value our land, we want to say no thank you. And that's a full sentence, period. And so I'm proud to say that that bill successfully passed through the Senate, through the House, and HB 1052, as of July 1st, is now law of the land. It is the first in the nation where no eminent domain for CO2 pipelines is allowed, period. And so I think, yeah. Now, there's a lesson in all of this. I share this story. You might be West River wondering, well, how does this relate to me? There was a legislator in Pierre who made a comment that really stuck out to me. And he said, you know, there's 50 more years of projects just like this. There's thousands and thousands of acres in western South Dakota that are looking to be gobbled up by wind towers and solar panels. And I don't know about you, but I think the South Dakota prairie is one of the most beautiful places on planet Earth. It is the perfect place to put a cow where she can upcycle that cellulosic material and turn it into the most nutrient-dense food on planet Earth, period, plus 100 byproducts that enrich our everyday lives. She is the most environmental success story that is out there today, because what a cow can do when she is on the land is she already sequesters carbon, because when you keep that grass in production, guess what? That carbon stays in the soil. She can upcycle that material. She naturally fertilizes it with her manure. She reduces the spread of wildfires with every bite of grass that she takes. That cow is a success story. The ranchers in this room today are the environmental success story. And I don't know about you, but I am tired. I am tired of politicians and the media and these associations bending the knee to the Green New Deal and trying to put the blame on you and I for what we do really, really well. And I'm not going to apologize for anymore. The American cattle rancher is a success story, period. So these projects are coming, and some would like to argue that folks like me and all these great legislators and these wonderful landowners from across the state are anti-everything. We are not anti-projects. We are not anti-development. What we are is pro-protecting our God-given constitutional private property rights. Free market capitalism, small, limited government where we're not giving slush funds and through economic development and enriching our friends while telling you and I that we just got to get by. We want a fair playing field to compete. We want a fair playing field so that we can continue to do what we do best to keep a free and fed nation. So my challenge to all of you is that we have to get to work. We get the government we work for. We have to show up. We are very underrepresented as farmers and ranchers in Pierre. We are even more underrepresented in Washington, D.C. But whether it's a township, your county, going to appear as a legislator, testifying on a bill, or traveling to Washington, D.C., if our story isn't told, nobody's going to tell it for us. There isn't one single person that can do it all. But if we all get off the bench and we all get to work and we all tell this story of the American cattle rancher, we can prevail. And you know why? Because people like the folks in this room today provide hope. They provide security. They do the things that are good and true and right. And that's what inspired my podcast, The Heart of Rural America, is because I do 50 speeches a year across the country, and everywhere I go, I meet great farmers and ranchers who are salt of the earth, patriotic Americans who just want to do the right thing. And I truly believe if people get to hear our story, they will fall in love with us. They will champion alongside of us. And American agriculture can be stronger than ever for years to come. So I'll close with this. There's a few things I guess I want to share. Number one, on the story of the landowners, my sweet daughter, Scarlett, she's 11 years old, and she told me she's got aspirations to run for governor one day, but she just can't quite figure out how to get the cows to peer. But she really wanted to be involved in this landowner fight, and she had told me at one point, Mommy, if you don't get this thing stopped, I'm going to run for governor myself, and I'll stop it myself. And I said, if I'm still talking about a carbon pipeline by the time you're old enough to run, we've done something terribly wrong. But what Scarlett did do is she wrote and illustrated a children's book called Home Sweet Prairie. This story is about the South Dakota prairie. It celebrates all that we hold dear, all that we hold true. She would have taken it to peer with her, but unfortunately in this fight, just to simply protect our God-given constitutional private property rights, families like mine received death threats. I had a window smashed in after a PUC meeting. There was a lot of negativity online, and I thought, you know what, kid? This is a $10 billion company backed by Saudi Arabia. You better let the grown-ups handle it. But our kids are watching, and what they're going to learn is when mom and dad and grandma and grandpa get involved, we can make a difference, and our kids will follow suit. The other thing I want to share tonight is, there's a lot of opportunities in the beef industry. We can be negative. We can talk about how 85% of our beef supply is held captive by 4 major players, 2 that are foreign-owned, one like JBS that's known for bribing 1,500 politicians in their home country, and yet they get to operate and exist here. We could talk about the challenges like we're losing hundreds of thousands of families off the land and how that troubles me. But I truly believe we're also in the best times we've ever seen in the beef industry today. There are opportunities in agriculture that we have not even tapped into yet. One of my favorite stories is I met a gentleman 10 years ago at an airport in New York City. I was out there reading my children's books. We've been all over with the books, from New York City to Los Angeles, everywhere in between. And I was in an airport getting ready to head home after that speaking engagement, and this gentleman came up to me, and he noticed I had cowboy boots on. And he looked at me, he sat down, and he says, "Are you a cowgirl?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I raise cattle in South Dakota." And he looked at me, and he says, "I've never met a cowgirl before." And he's looking at me like, "Do something, And I'm like, yeehaw, I don't know, what do you want?" But he'd never met a cattle rancher before. We had this great back and forth conversation. I asked him, "What do you do for a living?" And he says, "Well, I work on Wall Street." And I said, "Well, I've never met a guy who worked on Wall Street before." And he says, "Well, what do you want to know about us?" And I said, "Well, are y'all as crooked as you sound?" And he said, "Yes, actually." But I gave him my card. My flight got called, and I said, "If you ever have questions about agriculture, give me a call." Never talked to him again. He had added me on Facebook, never interacted with him until the global pandemic. What happened during the global pandemic? A lot going on. I get a call from New York City, and this gentleman was wanting to know if he could buy beef from my family because the shelves were bare in New York City. Now imagine this. You and I kept calving the cows and planting and harvesting and doing all the things that we do. And yet in the United States of America today, where we spend less than 10% of our disposable income on food, where 40% of it ends up in landfills, where 1 in 4 kids goes to bed hungry at night somehow, we had shortages and bare shelves. We had hogs that were being euthanized and put into piles because the plants were shutting down. We had dairy farmers that were having to dump their milk because the plastic bottles were on a port somewhere. And I thought, how in the world do we have a disconnect here where a gentleman with 2 daughters in New York City cannot buy a pound of hamburger to make cheeseburgers for his family? But you know what? That's where opportunity lies. You know what I ended up doing? Started a beef company, where as of a few weeks ago, we've sold to all 50 states in the union. Why do I tell that story? Because where the problems exist in this country, that's where the opportunities lie. And the people I think who can solve the opportunities the best live right here in rural America. We are the solution, and if we can be the solution providers, we can create pathways of profitability for our kids and grandkids. We can start bringing them back home to the family operation, and we can start making really good things happen right here at home in South Dakota. So I'll end with this. Do we have any servicemen and women in the room tonight? Please stand up so we can recognize you. Please stand up so we can recognize you. We cannot do it. Yes, please stand up. We cannot do, yes. Thank you. Thank you, guys. We cannot do what we love to do in the cattle business without people who are willing to sacrifice everything to keep us free. When I was that kid in Washington, D.C., I had the great fortune to meet a gentleman. He was a Vietnam veteran, a Marine, a cowboy from Kansas. And he gave me a call while I was working at the USDA, and he was on a mission. You see, Bill Brody was his name. He became a bonus grandpa to me. Bill Brody, when he served in Vietnam, was shot not once but twice in the leg in combat. When the American helicopters came to pick up that man out of the Vietnam jungle, he was dropped out of that helicopter on the exit, not once but twice. Not kidding. He got to an Alaskan hospital where they quickly amputated his leg, and he spent months and months recuperating from those injuries. He received 2 Purple Hearts for serving this country. Those 2 Purple Hearts were stolen from this great man while he laid in that hospital bed. He finally was honorably discharged, dropped off in San Francisco, ready to head back to the Kansas ranch, a broken-hearted man with 1 less leg. And he was spit on and called all kinds of names by protesters, and he carried that with him the rest of his life. And in 2007, when I met Bill, he was on a mission to make sure that the men and women who serve our country today never feel the way that he felt all those years ago. And his mission was to start a nonprofit organization that I'm proud to support. It's called the All-American Beef Battalion, stakesfortroops.com. And what Bill wanted to do was he wanted to thank the troops, and the best way that this Kansas cowboy knew how to thank the troops was with a ribeye steak. And so in 2007, when he gave me a call, this gruff Marine cowboy says, I need you to take my nonprofit status application to the Secretary of Ag's desk. I heard you work there. Will you help us out? And so that's all I did, is I tootled down the hallway and dropped it off on the desk. Really noble stuff. But within a week, his nonprofit status was approved, and since 2007, Bill and his team of volunteers have served 500,000 steaks to the troops as a way to say thank you. Bill passed away in 2021 during the pandemic, and it truly was a heartbreaking experience for me, but there's one conversation I have. It's the best conversation I've had with any person on planet Earth, and it was with Bill Brody. He's dying in a hospital bed, and he calls me on Christmas Eve. It was the greatest gift I've ever gotten. And Bill Brody and I were talking. We were talking about the cattle industry. We were talking about this country, and I was frustrated about the problems that exist. And I said to Bill, man, what are we going to do, Bill? What am I supposed to do? Now, I can't repeat all of the words because he used Marine cowboy words, but I'll give you the gist of what his last words to me were before he passed. He said, Amanda, when I get out of this blank blank, you and me are going to go to the foxhole together, and we're going to fight these blankety blanks together. Now, I think about that often. When our back is against the wall, when the bad guy is in our backyard trying to take what's not theirs, when our private property rights are being chipped away, whether it's our ability to own and manage our livestock without monitoring and mandatory IDs and everything else that comes with it, or when our land is under siege from private companies who think they can do better with your American dream than you can, I think about what would Bill do? He would get in the foxhole and he would fight. And that's my challenge to all of you, is we got to be in the foxhole together. Because if we stick together, what we learned from this fight in South Dakota that the entire nation is watching, and trust me, everywhere I go and speak, I get asked, how did you win in South Dakota? And you know what my answer to them is? Good-hearted people that wanted to do the right thing, locked arms despite their interests, their differences, and they got to work. And they didn't quit because failure was not an option, period. So with that, I just want to humbly thank the stock growers for everything. When I talked to Doris at the end of the session, I said, I will never forget the people who stood next to all of us and fought for 1052. And I said I wanted to be here tonight to share the story with all of you. So thank you, Doris, for letting me share this story. And thank you to all of you for your fight, for your continued fight, because it is coming. But I would never bet against the people in this room. So thank you.
I love you too.
Okay, Amanda did not know this, and I promised I wouldn't make her cry, but I might. We are giving her the Friend of the Stock Growers Award, and I can't imagine anybody more appropriate for this. She fights for us, she fights with us, and she's on our side. So, Amanda, as a Friend of the Stock Grower, welcome.